Brock Lesnar is a name that leaves no one indifferent. Whether you are a pro wrestling or a MMA fan, you probably heard of this freak of nature, perhaps the baddest man on the planet.
I stand in my ring! Brock Lesnar's ring!
According to some testimonies that should of course not be taken at face value, he would also be a violent man with vices who would have used his power in a sometimes questionable way. It's a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to tell you the biggest controversies about the one who broke the Undertaker's streak at Wrestlemania. Of course, nothing must be considered as an indisputable truth. Brock Lesnar has big qualities that many people have praised and is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Let's not forget it. Are you ready to be shocked when you learn how he would have been involved in sex scandals at different times? Do you want to know more about his physical altercation with Chris Jericho backstage at the 2016 Summerslam? Do you want to find out if he has ever been a drug addict or even a steroid user? And are you curious to learn how he would be linked to the craziest theory in pro wrestling history, or how he almost caused the death of several passengers on a plane? You have come to the right place, because in our video we will discover together the hidden side of the beast incarnate, and it will shock you. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the biggest controversies about Brock Lesnar. Let's go. One of the biggest controversies in which Brock Lesnar is involved is the infamous plane ride from hell. If you have never heard of it, imagine that it is a flight in May 2002 between England and the United States in which there were only WWE employees, essentially. It was the end of a long tour and the wrestlers were out of control, to the point of going way too far. Sexual assaults, violence, drugs, alcohol. Its consequences will be significant between dismissals and lawsuits. But did you know that Brock was on this plane and that he almost caused a disaster? At that time, Lesnar was still fairly new to the main roster. He was only 24 years old, but his physique and his history as an amateur wrestling champion already made him an attraction. Mr. Perfect, one of the company's veterans at that time, wanted to annoy Brock. You will see that this was a very bad idea. The two men were friends in real life, both coming from Minnesota. They even traveled together in the United States. They had another thing in common. They were both competitors at heart. So during this flight, Mr. Perfect wanted to compete with Brock Lesnar. Apparently, he would have said that he was a better wrestler than him, while Brock had still been a national university champion shortly before. They then allegedly improvised a wrestling match in mid-air. According to other witnesses, Mr. Perfect kept doing jokes on him. He allegedly threw alcohol and other things in Lesnar's face, who was trying to sleep. At that moment, he offered Brock to shake hands apologetically. But when he would have crushed Brock's foot on purpose while he wasn't wearing shoes, it was too much. Lesnar would have run after him. Then it would have become an increasingly intense wrestling match as they approached the emergency exit. In this moment of madness, Brock began to attack Mr. Perfect by ramming him against this emergency exit. This created a panic on board the plane. Indeed, Brock was going all out. So in theory, the emergency exit could not be opened, but they were afraid that they would destroy it and fall into the void several miles above sea level. In this irresponsible action that could have turned into a disaster, other passengers could have been sucked in if the emergency exit had been destroyed. They will eventually be separated by Triple H, Paul Heyman, and Finlay. For your information, at the insurrection show that took place in England before this infamous flight, Brock was involved in another scandal. This is a story that concerns Terry Runnels, also known as Marlena in the WWE. During this show, she went to see Dustin Rhodes, her ex-husband and Cody Rhodes' half-brother, in the men's locker room. While she wanted to talk to Dustin, she found herself facing Brock Lesnar, who only had a towel around his waist. He allowed himself to open the towel and show Terry his penis. As you can imagine, she found this extremely disrespectful. To top it off, what she saw is far from having impressed her. Indeed, she described Brock's thing as being small and purple. Of course, all this is based only on the words of the diva. It's important to remember it. This story is also reminiscent of the scandal in which he was allegedly involved in 2021. According to some allegations, a WWE employee was used as a sexual pledge to convince Brock to sign a new contract. Apparently, Vince McMahon promised him personalized sex videos from this woman. This scandal will push the company to cancel his return at the 2024 Royal Rumble and even act as if he had never existed for several months. You may have already heard about it. Brock Lesnar already had success in the UFC, the world's biggest MMA organization. First, we must remember that he originally comes from the world of amateur wrestling. So, when he decided to try his luck in Dana White's company, he wasn't really a stranger to this field. After many hours of training, he finally triumphed to the point of becoming the World Heavyweight Champion after only a few fights, defeating the legend Randy Couture in the process. His matches will enable the organization to sell a lot of pay-per-views, which proves that he was even an attraction for mixed martial arts fans. However, you should know that his story in the UFC also contains a controversy, and not the least. To fully understand it, we have to go back to 2016, a year when the UFC will celebrate UFC 200. What does this mean? This is simply their 200th event, which deserves a special card. For your information, Brock Lesnar had been part of UFC 100, so it made sense for him to interrupt his WWE career in 2016 to return to the octagon for one night. His presence was actually more complex than that. Originally, the big star of the organization, Conor McGregor, was supposed to have his rematch there against Nate Diaz, against whom he had lost a few months before, the Irishman being the most popular fighter. But this match was cancelled in the end. It was the same story for the long-awaited rematch between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. So there, the UFC was facing a big problem. Hold on tight. In this catastrophic situation, how was Dana White, the boss, going to keep an attractive program worthy of the event? That's when Brock Lesnar comes in.
If there was any time for Brock Lesnar to come back, it would just make sense that it would be for UFC 200.
With Brock, the pay-per-views were always selling well, so this decision to call on Lesnar 5 years later makes sense, financially speaking. But as you understand, the UFC acted urgently, at a time when Brock had wrestled in the Stamford Federation in April 2016, UFC 200 taking place in July. Wrestling fans know it well, superstars must have a larger-than-life physique, and many wrestlers have taken steroids for this purpose. What was already weird is that Brock Lesnar was only tested by the anti-doping agency a month before UFC 200, when in principle, any fighter must be tested for 4 months. We will say that with his status and his importance for the show card, the UFC didn't hesitate to grant him some privileges. On July 9th, he therefore faced Mark Hunt, whom he will beat by decision. The fight wasn't very spectacular in my opinion, but at least he didn't embarrass WWE, unlike others not so long after that. But the truth will explode right after this show. It is true that the presence of Brock Lesnar, among others, enabled it to be a financial success. But we will learn that Brock failed 2 anti-doping tests, first about 10 days before the match against Mark Hunt and then just after. So now we're wondering, how could the UFC let him fight while they knew about this information? The fact is that his victory will be cancelled, he will have a 1-year suspension, and he will have to give 10% of his salary to Mark Hunt. That is $250,000. Everything clearly gives the impression that Dana White's organization let a fighter cheat and accepted an unfair fight to save the event. In this controversy, some will see Lesnar as a cheater who disrespected the values of the sport. Others will tell themselves that he had traces of prohibited substances in his body, supposed to increase his testosterone level and counteract the side effects of steroids. He would take them when he's in the WWE. But since everything was done in a hurry to save the card, he ran out of time, so there were still traces of it in him. The fact is that it confirmed one thing to us, about which everyone will make their opinion. There are chances that Brock is indeed taking steroids when he is in pro wrestling. Of course, it is nevertheless true that getting such a physique also requires a lot of work in the gym, but if it were confirmed, we could have a slightly different image of this extraordinary athlete. There is a controversy surrounding Brock Lesnar that is truly fascinating, and that is actually a conspiracy theory. We're taking a little trip back in time to go back to 2014, and more precisely to Wrestlemania 30.
Into the cover, hooks the leg, the streak is over.
This show was historic, for many reasons, but especially one. After more than 20 years of invincibility at the showcase of the Immortals, The Undertaker lost there for the first time against Brock Lesnar. The moment was shocking, the reactions of the fans were memorable. But did you know that this match that has gone down in history is also the subject of a controversial theory? And imagine that it is not based at all on the assumptions of a weirdo on the web, but on what Paul Heyman, the advocate of the Beast Incarnate, said. According to him, Brock may not have respected the scenario that was planned. He might have done what he wanted at the grandest stage of them all, taking advantage of the dead man's very real concussion to become a legend. Quite naturally, this is to be considered from a distance. It is very unlikely that something so important has completely escaped the control of Vince McMahon and the officials. But when he put forward this controversial hypothesis, Paul Heyman had a vision of things that could install doubt in our minds. First of all, it's true that after such a shocking moment with its media fallout, the WWE couldn't have fired Brock Lesnar, even if it is especially important not to go out of the script in pro wrestling and do what you want if you don't want to be severely punished by the Federation. Could it have done anything? The hallucinating scene of The Undertaker's first defeat at Wrestlemania could never have been recreated. The emotion would no longer have been the same. What can make us doubt even more is that in the summer of 2013, Brock's victory at WrestleMania 30 was not planned. We could learn that Vince McMahon had presented Lesnar and Paul Heyman with the project that he would face The Undertaker there, adding that he would be the next to lose to him. But when leaving this meeting and returning to their bus, Brock allegedly told Paul that he would win, saying the now famous expression 21-1. 21 wins and 1 loss at WrestleMania for The Undertaker. For sure, Heyman is renowned for his lies, so it's better to be wary of what he says. But if it were true, it might be one of the biggest controversies in wrestling history. Brock Lesnar would have broken the golden rule of sports entertainment to steal the most prestigious achievement that dozens of wrestlers would have dreamed of having. Brock Lesnar is not just anyone in the WWE. For years, he was the most legitimate superstar there, one of the biggest attractions. He collected victories and belts. So as you can imagine, he has long had a certain influence behind the scenes. Even if we've already heard wrestlers say that he was one of the best at putting his colleagues over, it would have already happened that he did something quite controversial. This concerns his Indian colleague, Jinder Mahal. You must have in mind that in 2017, he sent shockwaves by being the WWE champion for several months. With his turban and his very strong identity, it is undeniable that his reign was refreshing. But in November, Brock came to get involved in this story. At that time, we were heading to the Survivor Series show, where the Monday Night Raw champion, in this case Lesnar, was to face the one from SmackDown, Jinder Mahal, the Universal Champion against the WWE Champion. The Beast incarnate against the modern-day Maharaja, a titanic matchup that promised destruction. But Brock would not have wanted this intense and colossal match on paper. He reportedly refused to face Jinder Mahal at Survivor Series. So, shortly before the event, the Indian lost his title after several months of reign against AJ Styles, who would finally be Lesnar's opponent. If confirmed, we might find it too bad that a whim of Lesnar ended the dream that Mahal was living. When we think of Brock Lesnar, we imagine this true force of nature. For years, he had an aura of invincibility in the ring, but also in the octagon. Seeing him, one might think that he is an example of discipline, an athlete in excellent health. But yet, this was not the case at all at one time. Prepare to be shocked. Indeed, when he started in the WWE in 2002, Brock discovered life on the road. He went from city to city, traveled constantly, and he didn't like it at all. You should know that he was a young man from the countryside who has always been used to being on his farm. This new way of life has turned him towards vices that tarnish his image a little, even if they make him human at the same time.
I stand in my ring! Brock Lesnar's ring!
What is surprising is that he isn't the first name that comes to mind at all when we think of wrestlers with addiction problems. Nevertheless, this is indeed what the Beast incarnate experienced in his first period in the WWE. In this life on the road that he hated, he turned to vodka and painkillers, which he consumed in abundance. His consumption was so big that he remembers almost nothing from that period of his life. His discomfort was so deep that he has already been on an airplane and looked at the door of the aircraft thinking of throwing himself into the void. By being aware of this past, we can better understand why he has never been a full-time wrestler since his return to wrestling in 2012. This is also another element that has always caused a lot of debate around Lesnar. He was often absent for weeks, including when he was champion. This is something that has outraged a lot of fans. But at least each of his appearances was must-see TV, and he wasn't destroying his health. Brock Lesnar is involved in another very interesting controversy. Don't go anywhere. It's all happening at the 2016 Summerslam. In the biggest show of the summer, we were treated to a new and beautiful matchup, Brock Lesnar against Randy Orton. It was a clash of the titans, a dream match that took place for the first time. But the finish of this match was going to make a lot of people talk.
Trying to bust up your opponent.
In a shocking and unusual scene, Lesnar was inflicting sharp elbow strikes on Orton on the ground. It was so violent that Randy got a concussion. And that's not all. These blows cut the skull of the Viper open, who ended in a pool of blood. unable to continue the match. So Brock won by technical knockout, like in MMA. The scene was so crazy that we didn't know if this finish was really planned. Behind the scenes, there is a wrestler who will not remain insensitive at this moment: Chris Jericho.
You just made the list!
Seeing Orton getting victimized at this point, Y2J was worried about his friend. He approached Brock Lesnar vehemently when the latter returned to the locker room. According to rumors, the two men were ready to fight and were first separated by Triple H and then by Vince McMahon. Apparently, when Jericho came to confront Lesnar, Brock would have given him a kiss on the forehead and yelled at him right after it, "Kiss me back, put." Through this controversy, we can guess that Brock is not the kind of person that colleagues should annoy. And this was it for the most shocking controversies about Brock Lesnar. Although we may be shocked by these scandals, it is essential to remember that these are never indisputable facts. Everything is usually based on testimonies, rumors, theories, which in no way allow us to definitively judge him. We should also keep in mind that Brock has been praised on multiple occasions by colleagues for his professionalism, his kindness when he liked you, the importance he gives to family, his incredible work ethic. He has many qualities that we can all draw inspiration from, not to mention his talent and his physical abilities that we don't come across every day. His track record in pro wrestling and in MMA is unmatched. There's no doubt about it. There is only one Brock Lesnar. I have a debate for you. In your opinion, what is the greatest achievement of the Beast Incarnate in his career? Come and tell us what you think. It will be interesting to exchange our points of view in the comments. We can say that Brock Lesnar is one of a kind. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the Paradise of Wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?